author, certified life coach, motivational speaker. Lester Young holds a number of titles. Another that might be surprising to some, convicted murderer.
Hey, peace and blessings, everyone. My name is Lester Young. I'm the founder of Path to Redemption, and I'm here today with Miles with Deputy Faulk. Let's get it. Mr. Young, this is Miles with Deputy Faulk. Man, I appreciate you actually coming out and do this with me. Absolutely. Man, this is probably gonna be my best interview, man, because I really enjoy your story, your backline and everything, and I think it's something to tell. So what we're gonna do is actually we're gonna get it in without further ado. Let's do it. I know you've been working out. All right, so we're gonna find out. We're gonna get a couple miles in and ask you a couple questions. That's all right. Absolutely. All right, this is Miles with Deputy Faulk, and let's go. Let me start my watch before we end up running 5 miles here. All right. So, as I said, I think you have a story to tell that I think everybody is interested in. And what I want to ask you is, like you said in the beginning, you are the founder of Path to Redemption. And so my question to you is, what is Path to Redemption? Backdrop about Path to Redemption. At 19 years old, I was sentenced to life in prison for murder. Okay. And was sentenced to South Carolina Department of Correction. And I remember sitting in prison, in that holding cell in prison, trying to figure out, how do you do a life sentence? But most importantly, how do I honor the life of someone I killed over something as frivolous as drugs? That was a real turning point for me. And it took me some months to discover that. One night I was in that cell, and I remember laying on my bunk, and I couldn't sleep. And because I couldn't sleep, I kept crying out to God, asking him to give me a reason, give me a sign. How do I make this right? And I remember God said, you said you need to seek forgiveness from the victim who you killed. Ask him. And I remember getting up, got on that cold floor in prison, and I remember started crying even more. And I remember for the first time, I mentioned the victim's name. And in that, I almost felt like this person came into my cell. And this is where I began my journey of redemption, was by honoring this person's life, by doing the right thing. And I made a promise to him that night that I will honor his life by doing right for the rest of my life. And that's where Path to Redemption came from. Beautiful. I always wanted to ask you, I seen one of your videos, on one of your interviews, and you talked about 180 seconds. Yeah. And for those who don't know, if I can share, the time of your crime was in the span of 3 minutes, 180 seconds. Yes. And 180 seconds cost you 22 years of your life. Absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of people, especially the younger generation, don't really reflect on. That moment of anger, the street life, whatever it is. So if I can ask you, how does a 19-year-old stand before a judge, family, whoever, and mentally prepare themselves that I just been sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 20 years? You can't explain that. And this is for me, who stood before that judge and heard that judge say, Lester Young, I now sentence you to the Department of Correction for 20 years of your life, right? Man, it's a feeling that everything stops and it moves in slow motion, where it's like, man, I can't believe that 180-second decision have cost me so much pain, but unfortunately have cost the family of a loved one, a son, a father, an uncle, to no longer be here for 180-second decision. So there's no words can explain what you feel when you call someone life, and then you stand before a judge and he tell you that you may never get out of prison again. It's a hard thing to explain. So a lot of people in the streets, they have many different reasons why they committed certain crimes. Yeah. One of the common things you hear from the youth today, whether they like to admit it or not, is about peer pressure. And afraid to break away from what society and what music or whatever it is telling them to do. Do you feel like any of those things played a part in the crime that you committed?
Yeah, I say absolutely. And this is the reason why, again, why Path to Redemption focused on youth mentoring. Because I use my example of all the things that led to poor choices. Music, peer pressure, low self-esteem, no confidence, no sense of self-worth, want to disobey your father, dealing with grief. Lost my mother when I was 16 years old. Didn't understand how to process grief and articulate it, which that pain turned into anger, which pushed me into the streets. So that's why now what I do with the youth is help them understand these things. One of the most powerful things now that I realized I wish I had was a level of emotional intelligence to be able to identify my emotions and to be able to articulate it. So going back into the 180 seconds, because of my lack of emotional intelligence as a youth, that 180 seconds became a permanent scar and harm to a lot of people.
That's powerful. That's powerful. So what was, and you may touched on it, but I want to go a little bit deeper. While you were in prison, everybody talks about rehabilitation and taking advantage of that. But I believe that everything starts within. So how did you use that time? How did you rehabilitate yourself? What was your mindset? I mean, obviously you had to get over the fact I've just been sentenced to 20-something years, life. So what steps, especially for who are youth, who may be in DJJ right now, who may be facing similar time, what steps can you advise them with that they may start that process of rehabilitation from within first?
I would say this, Abdul, before I answer that question, right? I don't tell a lot of people this, but I think it's imperative to share this.
Okay.
When I first entered the system, the first thing I thought about, it was not transformation. It was like, how did I take my own life? I thought about for a minute that I wanted to take my own life because I didn't want to deal with the consequences. And it was a blessing that an older gentleman who I used to sell drugs to in prison was my cellmate. And this man watched me for a couple days and noticed I was contemplating something wrong. And he stepped in and he started pouring into me. He opened up the Holy Quran and he started reading it to me.
Okay.
But before I started reading, he told me to wash my hands, my face, and my feet so that I can be able to be pure to receive the message. And that was the thing that really shaped me. And that again put me on that path to redemption, to reflect. Like I have to now make amends with God. But the most important, I needed to make amends with the victim. I needed to change not me, but how I saw the man I killed in that 180 seconds. And that's where the transformation began. So I tell a lot of young people today that that victim that you killed or shot because of your peer pressure, you have to deal with that man today or that woman. And you're gonna have to deal with the stress, the depression that's gonna happen. So transformation for me only came about when I started acknowledging the harm that I cause others.
I'm curious to know, in prison, a lot of people lean into something. Some people lean on religion, some people lean on drugs, gangs, whatever it is. What is a quote that you live by or that helps you throughout your time, even before, during, and after prison?
Two things. Before, I would say a verse that this guy showed me. My cellmate that I used to sell drugs to became a person that saved me. He showed me this verse out of the Holy Quran. It says, verily, with every difficulty, there's relief. Verily, with every difficulty, there's relief. And I remember, I memorized that verse, those days, the early days of my incarceration, that helped me survive the most challenging times of my incarceration, letting me know that verily, with every difficulty, there's relief. So that's the verse that I stand by, I hold dear to me. No matter whatever the obstacles are in life, that the Creator will always grant relief. And there's wisdom in the pain, but you have to be willing to acknowledge the pain first before transformation.
Okay. Another question that I have now, moving towards post-prison, right? After doing 22 years and everything, a lot of people, they have the excuse, and excuse me if this comes off the wrong way, but a lot of people say, well, I can't achieve certain things because of my record or because of this, that, and the third. Does that have some truth to it? And if it does, how can a person overcome that?
48,000 collateral consequences tied to a person's conviction.
How many?
48,000.
48,000, okay.
So there are legal barriers that prevent you from job, housing, education, various things, right? Mm-hmm. So when I walked out of prison, I was faced with applying for 100 jobs and not getting one. But what happened, my mentor told me this in prison, that your biggest enemy will be not the 48,000 laws, it will be your mindset. So my mindset changed before I walked out of prison. So even when I faced the 48,000 collateral consequences and was working at a job that only paid me $50 a day, my mindset was different. So it's mindset. A lot of people who face these barriers, they still got an institutionalized mindset that prevents them from moving forward.
So you said it's the mindset at first.
Mindset is important. That's in anything. Success or failure. Yo, what's up? We doing a quick interview right quick. What up with you? He killing me over here.
Two.
What up with you?
Lester Young. So even that in and of itself, for someone who did 22 years, for someone who's been through what can mentally break a lot of people, how does that feel right there? I mean, that one, we came out here for a run, and for someone to know your story, to touch it, to be out here running with a cop. I mean, how does a person achieve that?
Brother, I met him at USC. He's a college graduate studying law. So when I was advocating for banning the box, meaning removing off the state, the county, or the city application, he was one of those ones that helped in that process.
Ban the box, can you explain that?
Ban the box is, we're asking companies to remove off their application, have you been convicted of a felony, which will now give an individual an opportunity to present themselves as who they are today versus the crime in which they were committed for, charged for.
Okay. So my next question, let's take it to a different side. So, all right, let's take it to a different side. How does, there's no secret, right? There's a distrust between civilians, whether it be ex-felons and law enforcement. What can, from your perspective, what can we do as civilians? What can we do as law enforcement to help rebuild that trust in the community?
I was thinking about that this morning, right? What created, for me, a distrust with police, because I was living illegally. I was doing everything wrong. Do you police officers represent protection, security, safety of the community? I was the individual that was bringing harm. So I grew up with a narrative, hate the police for no other reason other than you are in the way of me carrying out illegal activities, right? So what I said to that question is how you build this relationship is that you have to change the narrative. Keep showing up in the communities, working with the young people who are not engaging in criminal activity, showing them that there's a difference between law enforcement and the thugs or the criminals who are trying to continue to destroy the community. Show them the difference. Show them where you're upholding integrity, honesty, protection of the community.
You explained about how to rebuild the trust between law enforcement and the community, but if you can, brother, I would like you to go a little bit deeper about that.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to watch your last video where you had Deputy Zaid, and he was talking about how going into law enforcement, most of his family doesn't support him, but he's doing it because he's something he wanted to do. And I thought about that, like, all of us, you can almost ask anyone, we all grew up practiced playing cops and robbers. And we always wanted to be the cop and not the robber, right? But when you remember those days, right?
Yeah, I remember those days.
But when we started, when me and my friends started getting involved in criminal activity, we started hating police because, as I mentioned, you represent something different. So that's why we push against it. But I believe, like, Serve and Connect is an organization that is run by a lady named Cassie, where she works in the community, building this relationship between law enforcement and the community, because her husband got killed by someone engaged in criminal activity.
Wow.
You know? So sitting with her and seeing her and me and other organizations, it's about working with the young people now to give them a better understanding of who police officers are and help them want to grow up and have that as part of a career versus hating it.
Wow. That's beautiful, brother. I appreciate that. Last question I want to ask you, what's next for Path to Redemption?
Redemption, our goal in these remaining years is to continue to use my experiences of incarceration, gang culture, to be the catalyst towards change in our community. Meaning in high schools, middle schools, juvenile facilities, and anywhere, to give the youth the $1 million worth of game of what crime life really doesn't pay. Like a 30-second, 180-second decision can cost you pain because you wanted an instant gratification. So using our story to empower our young people is what Path to Redemption is about today. And even after I leave this earth, it will be about legacy and using stories of like mine to impact change in the world.
Almost about 2 miles. Again, Mr. Young, I appreciate you doing
Always, bro.
Path with Deputy Faulk. Path with Deputy Faulk. Miles with Deputy Faulk. Miles with Deputy Faulk. Go to show you, cops, we do stay in shape.
Absolutely, man. I respect y'all grind, man. I respect it, man.
Yes, sir. Love. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All signs should be here.